Today we are going to be doing our first mock draft of the season. So I'm excited to do this here, Micah. We haven't done a mock draft for the 2025 draft yet, so this is
I'm
exciting.
I'm super excited. We haven't done a mock draft together yet, actually, so this is going to be fun. The way we're going to
Yeah,
go about this is we're going to go one pick each. Graham's a Titans fan, so number one pick. We're going to give Graham the start here. Just kind of get his rough outline of what he thinks is going to happen. So Graham's going to have 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, and so on. I'm going to have 2, 4, 6, 8, and so on. So Graham, if you want to go ahead, take it away. We'll go ahead.
yeah.
Actually, wait. We need to probably start this, don't we?
Let's do it. Yeah, and let me go ahead and start by saying that unless something changes, I think all of our mock drafts are going to be predictive. We might do like one that's like, what would we do as GM? I think that could be a fun idea, but I think for the most part, just go ahead and assume it's going to be a predictive mock draft. Obviously, it's early in the season, so we don't really have a ton of information on what people are going to be doing, and trades and free agency, things like that are definitely going to affect who gets picked where and all that good stuff. But we'll go off what we know now and kind of go from there. So all right. So we'll start with my Tennessee Titans here at the top of the first round here. I think there is a lot of directions that they could go here with this first pick. Quarterback is an obvious need at this point. Micah knows I'm a fan of Will Levis, but I think there are some things that you just can't correct with him, like his need to make a turnover worthy play, or even worse, I think than that, in my opinion, is he's got really bad pocket management. And so I think that somebody like Cam Ward could elevate that. As you guys know from my other videos, Cam Ward is clearly my QB1 in this draft. With all that being said, though, I think where I'm going to actually go here is I'm going to go ahead and just take best player in the draft, in my opinion. I think we're going up to Abdul Carter, number one overall here. I think that makes the most sense from like a long-term perspective with the new GM in there. I'm not sure that he's going to want to hitch his wagon to a sense to a Cam Ward at the very beginning of his tenure there. So I think we go safe here, take Abdul Carter. They mentioned, taking like, they won't pass up on a blue chip player essentially. And I think Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter are two of the only few like actual blue chip players. And I think Abdul Carter makes a lot of sense at one. There is a need at edge rusher as well. So I think we're fitting a need there. So a lot of it lines up to me to make sense to take Abdul Carter number one.
I like it. And if you're the Browns, I think this is probably the worst possible start. You're only picking second here. I mean, you're obviously the second pick, but this has got to be the worst start you can ask for if you're the Browns, in light of the news today that Myles Garrett has requested a trade, in which I would probably take, Abdul Carter if he was here, replace Myles Garrett, trade him for draft capital, and clean your hands of the whole situation and play for 2026. So, um, given the board how it's fallen after the first pick, I think this is pretty easy. You're just gonna go next to best player available. I don't think the quarterback is a realistic option here. That's my personal opinion, and that's why we're doing it one for one. So Travis Hunter, obviously, the other blue chip prospect, and I don't really foresee any other position here other than Travis Hunter. So Travis Hunter at two.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, especially in light of what you said, the Myles Garrett trade. I think if they do, in fact, actually trade him, I think there's no world in which they take a quarterback. They're going full reset. I don't think you drop a rookie quarterback in that situation. So, I think if they keep Myles Garrett, it could be interesting, but I think I'm with you overall. They probably don't go quarterback
Yeah,
at this spot. But
yeah, it just doesn't make a lot of sense.
yeah, I agree. Now, on the flip side of that, I think this is a dream scenario for the New York Giants
Most
at pick,
definitely.
pick number three. So this, if I'm the New York Giants in this situation, which I think they would, as well as what I'm about to say, you're sprinting to the board here, the podium to take Cam Ward,
Yeah.
number three. So I think he would actually really fit a Brian Dable offense. I think that would actually be one of the better fits in the first round. Actually, in my opinion, would be Cam Ward to the Giants. I know there's a lot of talk about they like Shador Sanders and they've kind of been watching him for a while, but I think they had like a third round grade on him last year, from what I heard, and I don't think there was enough improvement probably this year to warrant taking him at the number three spot. Again, I think Cam Ward would be a good fit here. So I think they would. This would be a dream scenario for the New York Giants. They're hungry for that franchise quarterback.
You're absolutely running to the podium. This is that it, you're. I don't want to go too much into it, but yeah, if you're talking about saving your job, this is Brian Dable and the GM over there. They're doing jumping jacks in the war room. So
Yeah,
I like that
for
pick,
sure.
and that's the only option at that spot.
Yeah.
This is really interesting because I've always been pounding the table for tackle here. There's a ton of options for tackle. And Graham, whenever you're picking, if you want me to go to some picks like this and kind of go over it, we can do that as well. But
Yeah,
um,
cool.
I I personally have Will Campbell as my OT1. I just trust the shorter arms. You know, if you don't know in the NFL, the 33, 34-inch arms are kind of the threshold for what you want on a tackle out on an island out there with these good edge rushers. Will Campbell has a little bit shorter arms, but we trust the prospect and what he is, multiple time All SEC. So Will Campbell normally is my pick here. But I think that Ted McMillan is really the interesting option. Obviously, the number one receiver in the class for me personally. Big body to pair up with the quarterback that you took last year. The receiving room is pretty bad. Not a lot of real threats there. So Ted McMillan at the end of the day.
Nice. Yeah. I think it's either this or tackle. Personally,
Hmm.
I'm with you. Will Campbell, offensive tackle one for me as well. I think like you said, trust the tape. I think his arms are not quite short enough to where it's like a major concern. And we've seen guys like Rashawn Slater have like a little bit shorter arms and still do well at tackle. So I think he's pretty comfortably still a tackle.
He's not a Willie Lampkin 5'11 UNC center. So there's
Yeah.
other guys with some flaws physically, but I just
Yeah.
trust the prospect. So
I agree. Now, the Jacksonville Jaguars, this is an interesting spot. They got Liam Cohen, obviously, as their head coach. So, you think that he's going to want to lean into the offense a little bit. But I think actually for him, he's probably at this point maybe mostly comfortable with where they're at. So I think he probably would elect to go defense in this situation. And I think they could definitely use some secondary help. They're one of the worst secondaries in the NFL this past year. If we look at the corners available, um, I know that like Daniel Jeremiah is like super high on Barron from Texas, and he's actually got him ranked higher than Will Johnson on his latest top 50 rankings. So that's very interesting, I think, in terms of who's maybe CB1, and we'll kind of talk through that a little bit ourselves as well.
yeah.
But I think in this situation, I think we're just going to go with what big board consensus is right now. We're going to go Will Johnson, for the Jaguars here. I think Mason Graham would also be a really good pick. He's probably one of those other like blue chip prospects in this draft, and I think they could definitely use him. But I think they're lacking so heavily in the secondary that I think it's a little bit of need. Plus, you've got a really good player there available.
Yeah, Jaguars are they. I mean, they're BPA here, but depending on where you feel about Will Johnson, with the injury history, and then Mason Graham, um, if he's your number one defensive player, then you take him, and if not, then you roll Will Johnson. But I think you can't go wrong with either pick there. They just need talent all around. Um, Six Raiders. Shador's on the board, but I personally have Shador valued at a mid to late day two player. Put him somewhere probably on my 50s on my big board. Um, I don't have Shador as a player, so I likely will not be taking him with one of these picks unless I think the value is there. Again, this is predictive. This is what I think is going to happen. I just think that teams are not going to value Shador the way that he's brought up in the media, so we're gonna pass on that for right now. But I think it could be an interesting spot for quarterback later. Um, Ted McMillan is my favorite spot, or my favorite player to pair on the Raiders. You have Brock Bowers and you have Ted McMillan, kind of like two physical anomalies on the same side of the ball is interesting, and obviously both being under 23 years old. So that's a really interesting scenario. But Ted McMillan's not available, so enough beating around the bush. We're going Ashton Genty here. I think that Ashton Genty is you know, a lot of people like the 10 spot to the Bears. A lot of people like the 12 spot to the Cowboys. I think he goes sooner than that. I think that if there's another blue chip player in there, it's Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter, and then I think Ashton Genty's in there as well as the other option. Running back value has gone down and down throughout the years, but after this last year with uh, you know almost two 2,000-yard rushers, with obviously Saquon hitting the achievement and Derrick Henry falling just short, I think the teams are starting to value running backs a little bit more than they have in the past 5 to 10 years. So Ashton Genty at 6 makes a ton of sense for me.
Yeah, man, a lot to unpack with what you just said there. I think that I agree. I like the Tet McMillan fit there, but it's not available. I'm with you on Shador, and everybody that follows us probably knows that I feel the same way about Shador Sanders, in my opinion. Um, yeah, I'm not sure if he goes there, where he actually goes. We'll see later in the mock if he goes in the first round for us or not. But
Yeah.
um, yeah, I mean, if you think back to like 2022, pre-draft, everybody was talking about how Malik Willis, all these guys are like surefire top 5 picks, and then they didn't
Yeah.
go to like the third round, except for Kenny Pickett, of course.
I'm glad
So
you brought that up because yeah, a lot of people were pegging, uh, I'm blanking on his name, Malik Willis, as a potential first round player, and we watched him fall and fall, and we're like, what in the world is going on? So yeah, I think it's a
yeah,
similar situation.
I do too. Yeah. So, anyways, move on to this next pick. Again, we're sprinting to the podium. If we're the New York Jets, we're taking Mason Graham here. I think, like you said, BPA, he's way too good to pass up on this spot. I think you pair him with Quinnen Williams and keep that defensive talent going on that team. I think the Jets are going to be an interesting team. You got Aaron Glenn, who a lot of people were really high on in terms of a head coach candidate. I think if there's a CEO type of head coach, I think he would be a good one because he really seems like he can establish a good culture, and he does seem to have a little bit of knowledge as well on the field. So, yeah, I think you build up the talent on that team. They've already got some young pieces, and I think you add to that with another potentially blue player here with Mason Graham.
Yeah, definitely one of those potential blue players, obviously with these other three. But the Jets are interesting because I usually have them mocking Malachi Starks just because I like the Aaron Glenn build up the defense. He obviously was a secondary player, so maybe he has an affinity for that. Starks is another great player. And now that I'm mentioning it, I said there was only 3 blue chips. I think that it's probably Abdul Travis, Genty, Graham, and probably Starks, and then that's actually it.
That might be it.
That's
Yeah.
probably it for me. After that, I'm looking at it again. It's still early in the draft process. There are a lot to develop here, but those are probably the 5. Which the Panthers here? Oh man, I don't even really know. Let me take a look at this. I don't think receivers on. I think Luther Burden's a little too rich for me at this spot. Obviously, none of these other guys I don't think are worth the top 8 selection. Panthers are going defense. One of the worst defenses historically. I think they gave up the most points ever last year. So I
Yeah.
think defense has to be the pick. Obviously, the
Yeah.
loss of Derek Brown made it pretty hard to swallow. And I think that you have to shore up the D line. I think that bringing back Derek Brown is going to be huge. Obviously, missing him for the whole year was terrible. Walter Nolan. This is a hot riser for me personally.
Yeah.
Um, One of the most 5-star, huge pedigree coming out of high school, nationally ranked in the top. I mean, he's in the top 300 obviously because he's a 5-star. I can't remember exactly where he was, but a lot of pedigree with this guy. Transfer player. Um, Made his money at Ole Miss. So we'll see where he goes, but I think he's going to be more of a hot riser. The talent is obviously there. The get off is incredible. So I like Walter Nolan there at 8.
That's actually really. I'm glad you brought his name up. He was definitely going to go for me at some point here in this first round because I'm with you. He's a riser for me also. He's like almost 300 pounds of just straight muscle.
Yeah.
He's got like super low body fat percentage. He was doing really well at the Senior Bowl this week, and I think he's going to be a riser as well. He is currently my second ranked interior D lineman after Mason Graham. So
Oh
I
wow.
think
Yeah.
this actually makes a lot of sense. I think so. So now we're on to the New Orleans Saints. I mean, this is if there's an interesting team out there, I think it's the New Orleans Saints. They've got so much you got to deal with in terms of their cap situation. You got to just load up on talent if you're them as much as possible. Sounds like Kellen Moore is going to be their head coach, probably more than likely. So who knows really what they do at this spot?
I feel like the Saints have been directionless for a number of years now. So it's you
Right.
don't. I mean, this pick could really be anything. This is probably the least predictable pick for me in my mocks.
I agree. This is one where it's hard to say exactly. I'm going to end up going because I think this guy does end up going top 10. We're going to go Shamar Stewart, edge rusher out of
Mm.
Texas A&M. He played really well this week at the Senior Bowl. You got Mike Green in there also. I think teams are going to really like the athletic makeup with Shamar Stewart. He's got the size you want. He's got all the measurables. He's got the speed. Pretty young as well too. He didn't do a ton in terms of like production at Texas A&M, but you see on tape that he's making plays without actually showing up in the stat box. So I think this guy does go top 10. Didn't practice that last day at the Senior Bowl. I think he certified first round status for him.
I like that. I like that pick. Shamar Stewart is a lot of the guys, the NFL insiders. Daniel Jeremiah, I know, is pretty fond of Shamar Stewart, so it'll be interesting to see where he goes.
Yeah.
10 here to the Bears. Um, I think the tackle slide has been, it's been falling long enough, and I think that given what Ben Johnson just had in Detroit, I think he wants to replicate something similar, obviously, with his
Yeah.
new Chicago Bears offense. So I think shoring up the O line is obviously the biggest part of the Lions offense. It's going to be a huge part of this mini rebuild, I guess you could say. More getting his guys in the building. Um, it, Depending on which tackle, I mean, Gray Zabel has been arguably the best player at the Senior Bowl. So a lot of people had him as the MVP. So he's going to be a hot riser. 37 ADP is not where he's going. He's going in the first round. Um, Membu is interesting, a little bit undersized, but 6'3", but he has longer arms, so I think that's a safe option. Kelvin Banks, a lot of people's OT1. Josh Simmons coming off the ACL, and then Will Campbell, as I mentioned before, who I'm going to actually take here. They need guard, they need center, they need tackle, depending on what they do with their left tackle in free agency here. But I think Will Campbell, you just trust the player, trust the what he's done over the past 3 to 4 years at LSU.
I think this makes a ton of sense. And I think, again, the tackle slide has gone on for too long. We're going to stick to that trend here with the 49ers, beef up their O line a little bit here. We're going to go with Armand Membo out of Mizzou here because he does have that tackle and guard flexibility. And I think that, this is something that they need to shore up a little bit. They obviously need both guard and tackle. So I think he's also going to go pretty early as well. At least, where we're kind of having him, I think is a good range for him. So he's somebody that, again, somebody like Daniel Jeremiah is pretty fond of. I've seen some other people give him some attention online. So I think this makes sense for him.
I like that. I like that a lot, and that's also your left tackle replacement of the future. So I like the possibilities with Membu there. 12 Cowboys. This is there's a lot of same Cowboys are another team I find myself struggling to find who to put here, but
Yeah.
a lot of people obviously like Ashton Genty here. I took him way earlier. I think he goes earlier than 12.
Yeah.
I don't think any of these other running backs are worth taking at this spot. I'm actually gonna go with Luther Burden here. If you take away CeeDee Lamb from that receiving room, and I don't know what you have even as far as skill positions go. I mean, your next best skill is I couldn't even tell.
Turpin, maybe the kick returner. I mean,
Cavante Turpin is your next best skill. I mean, it's pretty pitiful. I mean, I just think they need more weapons in there, and I actually think Luther Burden and CD is a really nice combination there as Remy makes an appearance. Uh, yeah, so I got Luther Burden at 12.
yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense. People have been mocking that one as well. Talking about that kind of wide receiver two spot. And I think that probably is where he would best live in the NFL. I don't know if he's going to be a true like X factor wide receiver one for a team, but I think as a wide receiver two, I think he does make a lot of sense, especially with his abilities kind of, I think would be a good complement to CeeDee Lamb. So I think that's actually a good spot for him as well. Dolphins, I haven't looked too much in the Dolphins this offseason so far, to be totally transparent here. I think that they could go a few different directions. I think they're kind of building up their defense a little bit. I think they like where they're kind of at, maybe with their D line. So I don't know if we go there. As you point out there, Malachi Starks is still available. I think he would make a lot of sense. I think Javon Holland is a pending free agent this offseason. So if he leaves, I think that definitely would be a good, it would make a lot of sense. So maybe this will change. From now till then, I think they could potentially go O line as well. Let's go Malachi Starks. I think he's probably fallen far enough. He's a really good player. I think he will go, early to mid first round where we kind of have him. So I think this would make sense for him, especially if Javon Holland does actually end up leaving this offseason.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of. I mean, I was pointing it out, not meaning to to put you in a
No,
box
you
there,
were
but
right. No, you're right.
no, I think that the Starks fall is obviously gone on long enough, and safety, like as you mentioned before, Javon Holland's likely gone, so it could be edge rusher, it could be tackle, it could be interior. There's a lot of options
Could
for
be a
Miami.
few things. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I want to get your opinion on this, Graham. A lot of people here have mocked Tyler Warren to the Colts. I think that it's an easy mock because it's such a position of need. Personally, I just don't. I'm with Broshmo on this one. Broshmo on YouTube. I just don't think that this is something that the Colts need to do. I know that Um, I'm blanking on the GM. Um,
Chris Ballard.
Thank you. Chris Ballard likes his physical freaks, and Tyler Warren fits the mold. I just don't. I just think there's things they need more. And at the end of the day, I'm going to pass on that. But what are your thoughts on that?
I think they could definitely use that. They've not really in recent drafts at least been known to take like a high end skill player. Like they've passed on receiver multiple times in the drafts previously. They've gone for like the second round receivers. They've got Michael Pittman Jr. They got like Alec Pierce. They've gotten these like what's the one recently out of Texas this last year.
Oh, AD Mitchell.
AD Mitchell, they took him in the second round as well early. So they're not really keen on taking like these high end prospect skill players like in the first round. So I agree with you. I think there's a few different ways they could go. I think Tyler Warren would make sense because they could use somebody like that. But yeah, I'm interested to see where you go here. I think they may not elect to do that.
Yeah, I think that the Colts were living in a good world when they had Leonard Williams, playing linebacker there. I think that they would maybe like to replicate that. And there's
Mm,
one player in particular who fits the mold for exactly that type of player. Um,
mm.
and
I know
that
where you're
is going to
going.
be Mr. Jalen Walker. I think that
Yeah.
that's like with the position versatility, as you can see on the team needs. Edge is a big need for them. Um, he can play, he can play stand up. He can cover. He's obviously laterally side to side is where he's best. So Jalen Walker, as we see back to back Missouri players and back to back Georgia players. So we
Man,
see pairs of teammates go here early in the first.
man, that's interesting. Yeah, no, actually, I love that pick for them. I think that makes a lot of sense. A lot of people are super high on his tools. He definitely could go earlier than this, but happens to slide in our draft here. And then I think you're right with the position versatility. I think they could value that. They kind of need that in both their linebacking core and as their edge rushing core as well. So I think that actually makes a lot of sense for them. Let's go to the Atlanta Falcons here. So they obviously just missed out on the playoffs this past year. I think they are going to want to build up their team around. Why am I blanking as well?
Penix,
Yes, Michael Penix Jr. Thank you as well. So
brother
he showed some
telepathy.
flat. Thank you. Yeah, it's needed often. Yeah, he showed some flashes. I think there's a little bit of like rookie isms you saw there, but I think it made sense to play him given that Kirk Cousins was not performing up to par, I would say, for especially what they paid him. So who knows what they do with him this offseason as well, but that's maybe a different conversation for a different day. Um, I think that, I think edge rusher could make sense here. I think actually corner could end up making sense as well with Barron out of Texas. So in terms of the players on the board, though, I think we're going to end up actually taking Mike Green at this spot. I think he does go some point here, probably in the top 20. I think again Atlanta's going to want to keep building up that defense with Raheem Morris at the helm, and people are going to be high on Mike Green. I think he's not the ideal size, but he's got a lot of speed, obviously, got a lot of bend, and young guy, and he did display some power at the Senior Bowl as well, which was kind of one of his question marks.
Definitely,
So,
definitely.
small school, stigma potentially, but I don't think that teams are really going to be paying too much attention to that if you're at like Marshall. I think that's for an even smaller type of school situation. So I think that would be the pick for them in this situation.
Yeah, I think Mike Green and his camp know that he's solidified himself as a first rounder. Obviously, opting out of day two of the Senior Bowl, so I think they feel good about where they're at, and this is a good range for him. I'd feel
Yeah.
good about taking him at 15. But edge rushers are in high demand, so I like that spot for him.
I think
Uh,
this is what happens though. I think we know that this D line class overall is super deep. I think there's going to be a ton of D linemen, edge players that are taken in the first round here. So I think so far it's tracking with what I think is going to happen at this point.
Yeah, and historically, every year there's guys who slide. I think of, Nate Wiggins as someone who slid 2 years ago to the Ravens. That was a guy who was, maybe going as a top 20 guy, ends up
Quinion
going.
Mitchell slid a
Quinion
little bit
Mitchell
too.
slid a little, yeah, second rounder. So there's a ton of guys who end up sliding, and good players just slide. That's the reality of the draft. So there's runs on guys and guys slide. So
I do have to correct you. Quinion Mitchell, he was the Eagles' first round
oh,
pick this year.
what
Him and Cooper DeJean. But yeah, no, yeah. So
They were Cooper G was the first.
They were both first round, I believe, weren't they?
Oh man, we're I can't remember. I swear I thought they were seconds. It might Cooper DeJean was a second. I'm almost certain.
Their first round pick was definitely Quinion Mitchell.
Okay, well then we're both half right, which equals a whole. So we're 100% correct. So
There you go. Yeah.
Cardinals here at 16. I think offensive line is a big priority. There are a lot of teams who this is one of my favorite drafts actually that we're going to be experiencing here in a few years because there's so much variability. I mean,
Yeah.
even from most years we can say, hey, number one, we know what we're doing, or we can expect what's going to happen. I don't think there's a pick in the top 16 picks that we can really, feel good about right now. I mean, even at number one. So I love drafts that do this. It creates for a lot of fun potentials. But I think Cardinals need offensive line pretty desperately. Um, Josh Simmons is interesting. Pair up him with Paris Campbell, who they obviously have. They've played together at Ohio State. I I question Josh Simmons' ability to play right tackle. Early in his career, that's where he played, obviously because Paris Johnson was on their side, and he graded out pretty horribly. Granted, he's a sophomore. He's, at the time, he's 20 years old, 19 years old. So how much can you really weigh that? So I'm going to pass on Josh Simmons here, but I think it is interesting that he could play right. Maybe if you feel good about it. But I think Gray Zabel is probably the pick here. Someone who could play tackle, guard, or center. So I think they just need offensive line help. I'm going to take the guy who balled at the Senior Bowl.
Yeah. That's interesting. I did look it up. So Quinion Mitchell was their first round pick. Cooper DeJean was their second round pick. So
Okay,
so
there
yeah,
you
he
go.
was picked. He was number 40 overall. So
There you
yeah,
go.
cool. All right. Yes. So now we're on to the Cincinnati Bengals. So this is, you know, again another interesting team. I think you're right on the money there. This is going to be a weird draft, and we're probably completely wrong because I think there's just going to be a lot of those guys in that not blue chip range that they're going to take earlier than people might expect because they're all kind of graded out similarly probably on a lot of people's boards. These kind of, maybe range 15 to 40 even. They may have players that are similarly graded out. So who knows what this draft is going to hold. But for the Bengals, I think receiver could make sense if they end up not being able to retain T. Higgins. Even if they do retain T. Higgins, I think you could elect to take another receiver here potentially just to kind of add on to that trio since Tyler Boyd's no longer there,
Yeah.
and they kind of need a wide receiver three emergence. I think it might be too early for them to take a wide receiver three, assuming they do retain T. Higgins. If they don't retain T. Higgins, I'm not sure there's another good like similar type of player
Yeah.
until Jack Beck maybe, and I don't think he's going to go this early.
I think Elick is another one of those guys who kind of plays big body who could be the same, but obviously this is 6'2" versus 6'5", so you're losing a lot of size with Elick, but
Yeah, so I'm not gonna like to go. I'm not gonna like to go receiver here. I think that people who watch the Bengals this year know that their defense was horrible. You got Joe Burrow on the other side, and I would say this too. I think Joe Burrow at this point in his career could probably elevate. Excuse me, anybody really around him at this point. For the most part on offense. You still got Jamar Chase, so you've still got that security blanket there. So I'm gonna actually elect to go defense here. I think we're gonna go D line. Could you tell me what edge rushers we have on the board right now? We
yeah,
got
sure
James
thing.
Pierce Jr.
I'll pull up both those for you.
So at this juncture, I think we're gonna end up going with James Pierce Jr. at this spot. Um, I think we add another edge rusher to the fold there for the Bengals. Build up that D line as much as you can. James Pierce Jr. before the season was talked about really highly. Could have been like a top three pick. Production wasn't totally there for him, and I don't think the athletic traits are maybe quite as impressive as people thought. But he had some good production throughout his career, and I think he still is going to safely be a first round player. So I think that makes sense for them.
Yeah, he had the it's a little misleading, he had an incredibly high pass rush win rate. I think he had the highest in the country at like 22.5%. A lot of that is just the mismatch of what his size brings, and the question is, can he play at the next level and retain some of that speed, at 248 pounds? I'm 217, so when you phrase it like that, it seems ridiculous for an edge rusher to be that light. But we'll see how it plays out if he can put on weight and keep that same explosiveness. So I like that pick though. Um, 18 to the Seahawks, another team that needs offensive line. I feel like offensive line is pretty needy for these last, 4 teams. But I think that these D linemen are too good to be sitting here. I think that there's got to be, particularly Micah Williams. I think that this is a guy who definitely could be a. I would not be surprised if this was a top 10 guy. Um, but I think that edge rusher is needed in Seattle. So not overthinking this one too much. Taking the highest upside player.
Yeah, I like that. We're not going to overthink this one too much either. For the Bucks, I think they could use some edge rush help. I think they actually could be like a sneaky dark horse team potentially for like a Myles Garrett if he is actually on the move. But we're going to go Nick Scorton here out of Texas A&M. I think that people are going to be high on the fact that he's very young. I think he's only like 20 years old. He's
Yeah.
one of the youngest players in the draft. Again, Texas A&M edge rushers didn't really have like a ton of production, or their D line in general didn't have like a ton of production. But I think people are going to like the traits, the age, things like that. So I think he's still probably pretty comfortably a first round player at this juncture. But again, I think edge rusher fits a need. We'll stick there for now.
I like that. 20 Broncos. I think you. I think. I mean. I think Bo Nix surprised a lot of people. I was actually quite high on Bo Nix last year when he's an easy player to make fun of. Just given his career trajectory and the type of guy he is, even the name Bo Nix is like, you want to make fun of the guy. But I really like tight end here. I really like tight end here. I think that Tyler Warren has fallen far enough. This is a match made in heaven for me personally. This is your Sean Payton, Jimmy Graham replacement, and Tyler, obviously best tight end, Mackey Award winner. Um, you're running to the podium, and you're
Yeah.
putting the card in. Tyler Warren's the pick.
This is what I'm thinking as well. I think they could use an influx of talent at tight end to kind of bulk up that receiving core there, and I think he would make a lot of sense for them. It's going to be interesting the debate between Warren and Loveland, but they really are two very different type of players, and not everybody's kind of pointing that out. Tyler Warren is more like your inline kind of strong guy. Maybe akin more to like a George Kittle, where he's good blocker. He's a good big body tight end. I saw even one person, which of course he's not. Again, let's make it out just for now. Let's go ahead and get this out there. Player comps is not a career projection for that player. We're just simply comparing like play style, things
Yeah.
like that. So with that being said, he's been compared, I've seen, to like a Rob Gronkowski, where he's got that ability to be in line, make those blocks. He's got enough athleticism to be in like an H-back type of situation, and then of course he's really good at the catch point too. So I think this would be an excellent fit for both sides. So now you got the Pittsburgh Steelers. Again, another interesting team here, and exactly what they do. Shador Sanders still is on the board for us in this spot. I don't think they go there. And again, people may be hating on us for not going Shador Sanders obviously earlier, but even at this spot when you clearly have a need there at quarterback, I think they've got some Kenny Pickett PTSD a little bit. It was a similar kind of situation, and you can almost argue they're kind of like similar players in some elements actually. So I don't think they try to roll with those, retread those tires again, if that makes sense. So I think that they're going to actually, in this situation, they would pass on somebody like Shador Sanders. I actually like receiver for them. And we're going to go with one of our favorite receivers in this draft. We're going to go Matthew Golden out of Texas. Started out the year as like kind of their wide receiver 2, and then really emerged later in the year. This guy is a very savvy route runner. He's again got great hands. He's got good. I'll be interested to see where he tests, like at the combine
Yeah.
and whatnot. I think he could obviously rise quite a bit, even if he does run into like the 4.4s. Maybe it's a possibility. He doesn't have like that elite breakaway speed. He probably is more like a 4.5 guy, maybe high 4.4s. We'll see where he goes with that, but I think this would be a good fit for them. He could play inside and outside. Pair him with George Pickens. I think this would be a really nice pick for them.
Yeah, I really like that, and we're both super high on Matthew Golden, transfer player from Houston. So I think that he's gonna be in a player. 22. we're not gonna worry about this too much. John Harbaugh's gonna get his guys at the end of the day. Position of need, Michigan guy makes too much sense. Did I say John Harbaugh?
I wasn't listening.
I, th-
I
I
don't
meant
know. I blanked.
I meant Jim Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh is going to get his guys. The brothers, obviously. So Jim Harbaugh is going to get his guy. Michigan player, position of need, obviously. I thought about a Mika Igbukka, but him and Lad McConkey are undersized, kind of like maybe pegged as slot guys. I think that's kind of selling Lad McConkey short based on what he gave us last year. But Colson Loveland just makes too much sense.
Yeah, I think we both knew where this was going, and I think
Yeah,
it does make sense. You can't pass up on Jim Harbaugh getting his Michigan guy. So
definitely.
I think this makes a lot of sense, and I think they would do this in this situation. Again, this is completely predictive at this point, but. So now we're at the Green Bay Packers. I think that they've this again maybe a little bit too rich for like interior offensive linemen maybe at this point for them. I could see like Tyler Booker maybe going there potentially. I'm gonna elect to actually go with cornerback out of Texas. We're going to look at Barron there from Texas. So this is a guy that's got some flexibility, can play nickel, can play outside. They do have some young talent at corner right now. Jair Alexander's, I think, getting a little older at this point, though. So, I think he's still playing at a pretty elite level, I would say, at this point. So I think it is worth still keeping him around, of course. But I think let's add some talent to that secondary, and maybe you can speak to this being a Vikings fan. Maybe you're aware of maybe where some of their deficiencies lie, but I think Barron would make a lot of sense, and I do think he goes definitely first round at this point.
So we're locking in Barron here.
Yeah, let's lock in Barron.
It hurts as a Vikings fan, as formerly mentioned. Barron could very well be the top corner prospect in this class, so it hurts to
Yeah,
see him fall this far. But
I think he
gosh,
probably goes higher than this, but
I mean, but that's what we talked about. Is the board falls. We like some of these other guys at their spots better. So and
yeah,
and again, a lot of these teams, it's interesting because draft philosophy is different from team to team. So some teams like the Ravens might go best player available every year, which they end up with guys like Linderbaum and Kyle Hamilton, and they end up with these guys at positions they don't need, but they're just such good prospects they take them. So
right,
it's hard to kind of gauge. You kind of have an idea of what some guys like, kind of like when I mentioned with the Colts with their athletes, but you don't really know at the end of the day. So we're just spitballing here. But I really like Jahdae Barron right there. No weaknesses in his game.
yeah,
Just a little
for
bit of a
sure.
late bloomer. So interesting pick.
High floor player, I think, for
Yeah.
sure.
I think he's got quite a relatively high ceiling too. I think that he could
Yeah,
be a number one guy. Vikings, Skull Nation. This is my pick.
finally,
It worked out
finally,
perfect with you having your pick and me having my pick. So,
yeah,
uh,
yeah,
so I love it. I love it. We'll have to do this again later in the year with the same style. But
yeah,
Vikings, a lot of people have guard mocked here. Guard is obviously a position of need. Excuse me. Guard is definitely a position of need. Tyler Booker, I would be interested in. Ideally, this is a trade down spot. Every single team says, "Oh, let's trade down," but nobody ever considers that people need to trade up for the same situation. And I just
right,
don't think that there's anybody worth trading up for. Josh Simmons has slipped for us. Amika Ibuka possibly, um, but I'm gonna pass on both of those. I think Benjamin Morrison is the pick. I think that the back issues have been a problem. And the injury has been a problem. Maybe a little bit of an inconsistent player at times, but at the end of the day, when it mattered, he locked up some of the best guys in the country. So I like Benjamin Morrison, fluid hips, smooth athlete. I like the player.
yeah, good player. I think he goes first round for sure as well. On to the Houston Texans. I've gotten a lot of I've picked for all of the AFC South teams as well. So kind of interesting it worked out that way too, I guess. I picked for Titans, Jaguars, Colt, or no, you
Oh,
picked
I
the
got the
Colts.
Colts. Yeah,
I was speaking to I talked about the Colts a little bit, so that's why I
you like
popped
the pick
that.
though. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So, anyways, on to the Houston Texans. Now, I think here you again on the same token, interior offensive line would make a ton of sense for them. I think they really need to improve that. I think pairing C.J. Stroud with Emeka Ibuka, re-pairing them, I should say, back from their Ohio State days would make a ton of sense as well. So it really is kind of a toss-up, I think, but between those few guys, I think they could improve their defense as well. But I think in this situation, you still like Tank Dell. Of course, obviously, Nico Collins is still a stud for you. I think you could, put somebody like a Mecca Ibuka in there as well. But we are going to go Tyler Booker out of Alabama. I think they just need interior offensive line help so badly. I think they would love to pair Ibuka back with CJ Stroud to kind of rekindle those Ohio State days. But I think the need is probably too big, and there's a player there that I think would really step in and be very good for them at that spot. So I think the just simply because of that, I think that's where they would go in this situation.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that because I do like Mika Ibuka at that spot. But at the end of the day, you got to protect your franchise guy, and Tyler Brooker makes a lot of sense. Rams. Oh man, these D linemen are sitting here staring me in the face. Like I think Tyleik Williams goes probably the highest floor defensive lineman, best run stopper in the class, arguably. Him and Mason Graham are up there together. I'm tempted to do it, but they took two D linemen early last year with obviously Braden Fisk and one of my favorite players in the entire class, Jared Verse. So I think they pass on D line, although they definitely could just based on who's the best guys available at the spot. And you know what? I just talked myself into it. We're gonna go Tyleik Williams. So best run defender in the class, based on my observations thus far. Mason Graham obviously has a strong argument as well. Um, but I think these D linemen are too talented. At the end of the day, if it's a need or not, he's one of the most talented guys there. You take the talented guys.
Yeah, keep building up that front seven. I think that'd be a great idea for them. I think
Yeah.
it's kind of weird with the Rams. They went from like this is our window. Let's kind of we'll say like f them picks type of thing.
Yeah,
That was like the meme for them
certainly.
for a while. But now it's like they're kind of adopting like the draft and develop a little bit. They've got like Puka. They got Jared Verse. They got Braden Fisk. They got these other front seven guys that have kind of were kind of under the radar, but have ended up being pretty good for them. So it's kind
Man,
of
they
weird how
hit they hit on their picks, man. The
they
Rams just
really
hit on their
do.
picks. Their scouting department has got to be one of the best in the league.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I agree. So they'll be interesting to see. It's always interesting to see what they do. But we're gonna go Baltimore Ravens here. Now, Emeka Ibuka I think does make sense. They've taken these late first round receivers a lot. So I'm not sure if they do that again. You've got Rashad Bateman, you've got Zay Flowers. I think they're probably okay with where they're at right now in terms of their receiving core, unless it's for like a true number one X guy available via like trade or free agency or something, maybe. But I think with the potential departure of Ronnie Stanley, I think now Josh Simmons could step in for them. And even if he does re-sign with them, you've still got like that kind of developmental tackle for them. And again, he's got some inside flexibility, which they may not be an immediate need for them. But I think he's in the conversation for offensive tackle one. He probably would be more in that conversation if he didn't get hurt this past year. So, I'm going to assume that Ronnie Stanley departs for them in free agency, and we're going to go with Josh Simmons with this pick.
And dude, that's exactly what I was talking about with the Ravens taking guys that just fall. Like Josh Simmons is healthy. Josh Simmons is a top half of the draft pick, lottery pick in NBA terms. But yeah, he's a guy that falls. That's a very Ravens pick. I feel like if someone of his caliber is there. So I love that fit. I actually have not had him fall this far in mocks so far, but I'm glad he did because it's a good fit.
Yep.
Lions, D line. Again, D line, D line, D line. Help on the defense. Injury bug caught him pretty bad last year. Not a lot you can do about that. Um, you're bringing back a lot of your D tackles. Both of them obviously got injured. Aiden Hutchinson goes down. They just need defense. Just more defense is all you can ask. Offense is set. I'm not really worried about that. The question is, what defender do we like here? Um, Man, I love Deion Walker's ability to stop the run. Maybe a little rich for me at 28, but I think he could sneak into the first round if he puts up an interesting combine because the frame, he fills out every bit of 6'6", 350. So,
He
um,
measured 6'7" at the Senior Bowl, I believe. So
yeah, so six, yeah, even freakier than what we saw, but another one of the run defenders who we're super interested in. So we'll see what happens there. Oh man, this is a tough one. I want to do it for the sake of being fun and switching things up, but yeah, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it. Um, as I mentioned before, D line is a huge need. They could have gone linebacker here actually. I think Jihad Ward might have been an interesting pick, or Jihad Campbell, excuse me. Jihad Campbell would have been a really strong pick here as well. But no, I feel good about Deion Walker. Defense. At the end of the day, just defense.
Defense, yeah, I think beef up that D line. Again, I think this is again what we talked about earlier in the video. There are going to be a lot of those guys in that 15 to 20 all the way up to like 45, 50 range where teams are going to have guys graded differently or at least for on their board probably closely. So you never know. They could absolutely love a guy with an interview and have them closely graded as like a player and it fits in a position of need and they take that guy. So we've seen stuff like this happen plenty where maybe before the draft the guy wasn't consensus maybe to go this high but does and I think he is a riser as well with that frame. I think that's definitely like an anomaly and oftentimes anomalies make it to the first round.
Yeah, definitely.
So I do like that. We are going to finally go Emeka Abuga here for the Washington Commanders. I think let's just keep improving that receiving core that already is pretty good. And again, another case of kind of like good player just falls. And I think as we both probably agree, he's got to be one of the higher floor players in the draft. He's going to be very good slot receiver, may have some outside flexibility potentially. He just hasn't really done it a lot. I don't know if it's like an ability type of issue for him, but it's more of just he's got more time on task in the slot, essentially. So I do think he would fit though with Terry McLaurin and De'Ami Brown. They're different guys they've got there, but I think they could add another good first round receiver type of player to make an impact for him. So I do like that pick for them.
Yeah, and obviously you just give Jane Daniels the weapons to keep going. You're not going to replicate this a top 4 finish again next year. That's just the reality of the team. They had a great run. It's not going to happen. Let's just give him the tools to where we'll see what happens. See if he can catch fire again in the postseason, which he was arguably one of the best postseason players this whole year. So really excited about the future for them. Happy for Commanders fans as well. That's a tough franchise to root for. So I'm excited for them going forward. Bills, dude, I would kick myself if I let Kelvin Banks fall to the Eagles. There's no way that I can allow that to happen. Offensive line, when you have someone like Josh Allen, who I think is, got a conversation for the best quarterback in the league. Mahomes had the better career, but if we're talking about the better previous year, Josh Allen's got it for me. You give him weapons. I think that it's a good offensive line, but it's an aging offensive line. Kelvin Banks is someone who could slide into guard if you needed to. I think you can make some tough decisions and, find somewhere. You have Osiris Torrance out of Florida who they took not long ago at guard. You obviously have your Pro Bowl left tackle, but there's still other options. Kelvin Banks is way too good to be here at pick 30, and I don't want the Eagles getting another elite offensive lineman potentially. They're an offensive line factory, so I'm not giving them that opportunity.
And that's an interesting point you actually bring up with the Eagles, and where my mind goes a little bit is they often draft in a position of need, not immediately, but in the next few years. They kind of get ahead of the curve essentially, and so the Bills would kind of be adopting that a little bit, that strategy, which I think is a good one because then you really are again, taking into account the fact you're going to have that need in the future and then don't have to reach for that need when the time comes. So it all depends on how high they have, Kelvin Banks on their board. But I think at this point, he certainly would be in the conversation because he's certainly talking about going top 10 and being offensive tackle 1 in this draft.
Yeah.
So I think that would make sense for them in a lot of ways. So now you are on to the Philadelphia Eagles. They don't have many holes on their team at this juncture.
That's why they're one. That's why they're one of the tops. Yeah.
That's why they're at 31, even with Jalen Hurts at the helm for them. So if we look at like the receivers available to them, I think that could be an area in which they go. I'm not sure any of these guys sneak into the first round. Obviously I'm high on Jalen Royals. I definitely don't think he's a first round. He goes in the first round, I should say. I know Jaden Higgins got a lot of hype as well as Jalen Noel. Both the Iowa State receivers, I'm not sure either one of them go first round. You got these other guys here as well. So I'm not sure that receiver is a smart move for them at the end of the first round here. I think this could be a trade-up situation if somebody was really interested in Shedeur Sanders. We're not doing trades in this mock draft, but I think In this scenario, I think somebody could elect to trade up to the 31st spot to lock in that fifth year option. Excuse me,
Yeah.
as the dryer goes off here. Uh, but so yeah, I think that they could go a lot of different ways. Let's take a look at the offensive linemen though that we do have available because I think you make a good point about potentially drafting one of these guys earlier than maybe they need to do so. We are going to actually go Donovan Jackson out of Ohio State, excuse me, with this pick. He obviously mostly played guard for Ohio State, but had to step in at tackle, at left tackle for them nonetheless in the playoffs and performed very well. He probably measures better as a guard, but I think he played well enough at tackle in the playoffs on the biggest stage that you at least warrant him an opportunity to do so. And at the very least, he's got flexibility to do both. And like you said, it's a kind of similar situation where they've got older offensive linemen, but again, it's you've got Lane Johnson, you've got these other guys, and I think that if you can really groom a guy to step in and keep a position of strength as a strength, I think that just makes the most sense. So this would be very Eagles-esque to do something like this, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that I actually like tackle. Ezra Dryer's making another appearance. I do like tackle quite a bit for the Eagles, especially with the aging Lane Johnson. Personally, I think that I mean Josh Connerly's also there. I think Cameron Williams is somebody who's also shout out Bengal UT, but this is somebody who's a freak athlete who I'm really interested to see his combine. I'm a big Ozzy Trapillo fan, 6'8", good hands. Jonah Savianea, I believe that's how you say it.
That
Could be
was pretty
totally.
good.
You think that's pretty good?
I think
Uh,
that you were right. Yeah.
there you go. Okay. I think there's a lot of guys who could go. A lot of
Ursary is
tackles.
there.
Ursary is
Needham
there.
out
Yeah.
of West Virginia. You got a
Yeah.
few pretty good solid tackle options
Obviously, we
here.
had we had the the tackle guard early, Mr. Whoa,
Mr.
Gray
Membo.
Zabel, Mr. Gray
Oh,
Zemble.
Zabel as
Yeah,
well. Yeah.
ton of tackles. And I think tackle is obviously one of the most important positions in ball. So there's a lot of ways you could go. I'm delaying this last pick is what I was doing. So the the Chiefs, man, they have PTSD from the LSU pick at
Edwards
32.
Edwards-Helaire.
Yeah, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. They might have some PTSD here, but I don't think it scares you away from taking someone like Travion Henderson. Explosive back out of the backfield, someone who would pair nicely if they decide to bring back either Pacheco um, or Kareem Hunt. I think that that's a nice pairing right there, like a third down change of pace guy. Travion Henderson's one of those guys I got my eye on. Same for Devin Neal, but a little rich for Neal here. Travion could sneak in. I'm either going there or I'm going Jihad Campbell. I think that this is like your Willie Gay type player, a little bit more athletic in my opinion. But I don't think you can go wrong either way. Now it's just a question of do I think you take someone like Jihad Campbell or do I think you take Travion Henderson? Um, I think that Spags is. I mean, I feel like he's going to be there forever. But you know, maybe he gets his guy. I'm gonna go Travion Henderson. I just think you keep giving Patrick Mahomes as many weapons as possible, even with the poor weapons he's had in the past couple years. He makes it happen. So let's treat him a little bit. I'm just looking at this disgusting run of Ohio State players here towards the end of the first, with
Wow.
five
No
out of the
kidding.
last seven picks being Ohio State guys. But they're the
Man.
natty champs. So that's what you get when you win big.
I've heard they're probably going to break the record this year for most guys drafted. Out of the school in a single year. So
Yeah.
I'm sure they'll break that. But I like Travion Henderson a lot too. Actually, I've got him very closely graded to Amorion Hampton out of UNC Chapel Hill. I think teams could definitely elect to go for Henderson over him. So I like his game quite a bit as well. So I think he could sneak into the first round too.
I think for the Chiefs it just makes the most sense. Someone like Amari Hampton is more of a Chargers fit for me, kind of like a one cut back, same as the J.K. Dobbins mold. Travion Henderson feels like a more Chief type player.
Yeah, I like that fit for them better as well. Yeah, so we've got our picks locked in here. Please, guys, let us know what you guys think. This is first of a few different mock drafts we're going to do this draft season, but we wanted to go ahead and do one now to kind of get out in front of it and see how things change by the time we get to April. So I don't have any really closing thoughts on this here, Micah. Anything you want to shout out here at the end?
No, it's an exciting time. Mock draft season, baby. Let's go. Super Bowl and then mock draft season.
It's one of our favorite times of the year. Thanks so much, guys, for listening in, and we will be talking to you soon. See you later.
Till next time.